Hello everyone and welcome to this talk by the University of Law called What is the Bar and How to Get There. This is our sort of tips and tricks on getting through the scholarship application process with the Inns of Court, how to survive on the BPTC, and also our ideas about pupillage and how to get it. So my name is Joe O'Leary. I'm the Future Pupil Programme Coordinator for the University of Law. This means I did the bar course with the university last year and have obtained pupillage since. So without further ado, let's get on with the starting point of what does a barrister do? So first things first, let's just find out who we've got in the room. So is anyone here not doing a law degree? Brilliant. What are we all doing roughly? Linguistics? Okay, and anyone here in the first year of university? Brilliant. Second years? And third years? And of the majority of third years, are you mainly doing law? Brilliant. So, without further ado, let's just ask ourselves, what does a barrister do? What are the core skills needed to be a barrister? And perhaps, what sort of things should you be thinking about if you were thinking about embarking upon a career at the bar? One of the key skills of a barrister is advocacy. It's fundamental and it is what is required as the keystone of your practice. But advocacy isn't just like you see on the telly. It's not just great, big, lovely speeches in a courtroom to juries and judges. Actually, a lot of advocacy is written. The vast majority of what you do as a barrister is written work, sometimes in an office or 9 times out of 10 actually on the train going to different offices. But written advocacy is really fundamental for a career at the bar, and it's something that you really have to be thinking about, not just in applications you're making now, but everything from now on right into the future. Developing a key written ability is vital. But also, as is being able to stand up and speak, which is something we should never be able to forget how to do. We do have a split profession in the UK. We do have solicitors and barristers. There is quite a big difference between the two. We are seeing some blurring of those lines, but generally now the profession is split. Good analogies like if you're going to see a GP about an earache. The GP will be able to tell you that yes, there is a legal problem, perhaps yes, there is an issue that we can fix, but what the GP may then do is refer you on to a consultant in a higher medical body. That's effectively the same thing as a solicitor referring you to a barrister. The GP or solicitor tells you the problem, agrees with you, and then refers to a barrister on perhaps the best way to deal with that. But fundamentally what barristers do is courtroom based. Everything we do is thinking about looking at what's going to happen in court, how would a judge receive certain things, pieces of evidence, or how should we adopt a strategy for litigation. So barristers fundamentally are looking at courtroom ability. So there is quite a big difference between being a barrister and solicitor. There's really in the UK, there's the word lawyer gets bandied around, but when we say a lawyer, we have to be a bit more specific. A lawyer is quite a generic term. A lawyer is an umbrella term for anyone who works in the legal profession. So for example, both solicitors, barristers, even judges are all lawyers. But the solicitors make up the vast majority of the legal landscape in the UK. As you can see, about 160,000 lawyers are actually solicitors, by far the bigger number. Compared to barristers, we have around 16,000 barristers practicing in the UK. As such, it's a really nice, lovely, small group of people who tend to know most of each other, but also you form this very small but supportive community. And that's probably the big difference between the bar and being a solicitor, is that the world is a lot smaller, which has its many benefits, but also does have some drawbacks as well. Of which you can see we have QCs. They make up about 1,500 of barristers. QC, for those unaware, is perhaps the highest badge you can get as a barrister. It means that you've been seen as one of the better advocates in the country, if not the best. So when asking yourself if the bar is right for you, these are the things we think you should be perhaps considering. As a barrister, you have to have a great degree of intellectual ability. It really is a landscape of academic challenge and debate. The theories that you're grappling with are complicated, they are important, but also they're actually quite in-depth and theoretical in some aspects. So when thinking about whether the career at the bar is right for you, we have to really be thinking about what's our intellectual capacity. But saying that, you can be the cleverest person in the world, yet if you can't communicate what you know or your understanding of the law, then you will also struggle as a barrister. A barrister's key job, fundamentally, is communication. Whether it's communication of your client's best interest to a judge or a jury, or explaining to your client perhaps the intricacies of a certain part of law, or explaining to a judge how you think the law should operate in that situation. You have to be able to understand the law, but also convey it. And convey it in a way that depends upon the person you're conveying it to, be them client, judge, jury. And again, also that means you have to be able to convey it in a written and or oral way. The two are very different, but both equally important skills. Also, as a barrister, you have to be able to perform under pressure. Time is tight, deadlines are very, very short. So if you're thinking about a career at the bar, you have to really be thinking about, can you work in those very fast-paced, quick action decisions, especially in areas such as family and crime, where it's perfectly feasible for you to get given a case right at the end of one evening to do the very next day. Thinking on your feet and being able to deal with problems quickly is vital. And also, the bar is a very hard career path to follow. You have to have the determination, commitment to get there. If you're umming and ahhing about something, be it in court, in an application, wherever, you have to make sure you're putting your 100% into everything, because that is what's required of you at the bar. You also need to have degrees of sound judgment and a real appetite for hard work. As I've been saying recently, it's all about intellectual challenge, communication and pressure, and all of that takes hard work. You have to have the ability to just really plug away the long hours, the hard hours of in-depth reading and understanding very complex theories. But if you're ticking most of those boxes, then perhaps the bar is right for you, and hopefully you all are. But we need to be under no illusions. The bar is a very hard profession, but when you get there, it's one of the most rewarding and best professions out there, and I would recommend every single one of you really think serious about it if you want to do it, because I would recommend it fully. A lot of people ask us about barristers' incomes. Unfortunately, there's not really much we can say about this because every barrister is very different. The bar is a very diverse, very broad area, and as such, incomes are very diverse and broad to reflect that. Pupillage awards, we'll go into what pupillage is in a moment, but pupillage is the first stage of your training. You have to have an award for pupillage, and that award generally has to be the living wage. This used to be £12,000 a few years ago, but it's now changed as of this summer to be the living wage, which we all think is quite generous of them. But there is no limit. Some chambers do offer up to £70,000 of pupillage awards, and that's kind of indicative of perhaps that area's income over time. But that one chamber that offers £70,000 plus, that's one in a sea of many, many others which may offer a lot less. However, you're self-employed. So the more work you do as a barrister, the more money you get. The better your reputation gets, the more money you get. So when thinking about your income, you may read headlines that say barristers earn no money or barristers earn far too much. Actually, there's no way to describe it, because every barrister is very different, because they're all unemployed and they all operate in different practice areas. But please don't listen to the media. You may hear of the Daily Mail reporting on all sorts of stories of barristers on the legal aid gravy train raking in millions of pounds a year. Barristers are self-employed, so we have to take our expenses off as well, including travel, clerks' fees, rent, everything. It's also worth mentioning we now have an employer bar. I've hammered on a lot about how barristers are generally self-employed. That's not necessarily true. There is an employed bar now, and it's growing. The CPS is one of many organisations that actually employ lots of barristers in-house. But again, the fees there and how much you get paid range. Of course, with the employed bar, there are many perks. You have an office, you don't have a pension, a salary, you have a bit more job security. That's all really good. But also, as a barrister, what is quite fundamental for a lot of people is the fact you're self-employed. So again, when thinking about your career at the bar and how you want to develop it, think, do you want to be a self-employed barrister or employed within a firm or other organisations such as the CPS? So this is the part I think a lot of you are here for, the procedure for qualifying as a barrister. This is how you get to become a barrister within England and Wales. Firstly, for those on a non-law degree, you don't have to have any specific degree to be a barrister. You can be a barrister with any degree you like. So there's no restriction there. But if you have got a non-law degree, like the few of you are here today, you then have to do what we call the GDL, the Graduate Diploma in Law. This is a conversion course. The University of Law provides this. A among others, I might add, but the University of Law, we offer a GDL, which gives you all the core skills you need to practice law in the UK. It goes through all the fundamental principles of law, such as crime, contract, tort law, EU, public, and so on. So the GDL effectively tops up your non-law degree to that of a law degree. For those of you on a law degree already, the LLB, sometimes referred to as a qualifying law degree, the Bar Standards Board, who are our regulator, they call this the academic stage of getting a career as a barrister. So again, those of you on a law degree that you'll recognise as well as like contract, tort, crime, so on. This is the baseline, and the GDL will top up any non-law degree to be equal to that of an LLB. After you've done your qualifying law degree, you then have to do the BPTC. This is the Bar Professional Training Course. This is called the vocational stage and aims to provide you with the core knowledge of law, advocacy skills, rules of evidence, everything you need to know to cut it as a pupil barrister. Again, the bar course, we offer it here at the University of Law, and this is where you really start to hammer home those advocacy principles. When you finish the BPTC, you get called to the bar. This is where you go to grand ceremony or inn of court. Well, again, we'll come on to the inns of court in a moment, but that's where you can get called to the Bar of England and Wales, and you have the title barrister. After the BPTC, you have to get pupillage. This is known as the professional stage. This is very much like an apprenticeship you may have heard of in other areas. This is made up of 2 periods of 6 months. Your first 6 is completely non-practicing. You follow around someone called your pupil supervisor, and you will observe them, you'll see how they operate in court, and you will pick up all the tips and tricks there. Your second 6 months, you're on your feet. You can take on your own cases, take on your own clients, all still under the supervision of your pupil supervisor, but you're practicing. Pupillage is undertaken usually in a chambers of barristers. You apply to a very specific format. And pupillage is the last stage of training. When you've completed your pupillage, you then have to get what's called tenancy. That's where a chambers takes you on as a tenant within their number. A chambers is an association of barristers who, whilst they're all self-employed, have grouped together to share things like offices, printers, clerks, support staff. And that way they can save money, cut their own costs, but also be surrounded by a support network of other practitioners ranging in experience. So your pupillage you complete in a chambers. The numbers for this incidentally go from loads and loads of people at this stage down to about 1,500 to 2,000 doing the BPTC, down to I think around 400-ish pupillages on offer. So that's the breakdown of the numbers. As you can see, they all scale down quite nicely. It's certainly doable. For those of you in third year, this is what the sort of things we think you should perhaps be looking at doing before the BPTC, or for those who are already on the GDL, this is the sort of task you should perhaps be ticking off over the next year. For those of you in the room there, in your pull-out, you've got a timeline with lots of this on, so please do look at that. So the first thing we recommend doing is coming to some pupillage fairs. These are where loads of chambers get together in a room, and they pull their members out, and you can ask them any questions you like about the bar, pupillage at their set, what they're like to work with and work for. So these are the key dates for the main pupillage fairs coming up. The Bar Council Pupillage Fairs held at King's College in London, the Northern Pupillage Fairs hosted by us up in Leeds, and the National Pupillage Fair will be happening at Gray's Inn. The dates for all these are also in your little bundles, so don't feel too hurried to scribble them down. Then we have barrister insight evenings. These are really good events run by the University of Law where we get a load of barristers, usually in a room like this on a panel. And a bit like question time, we just let you ask what questions you want, within reason. And then we let you ask questions about the bar again, what it's like at their set, what they think their top tips are for getting a career at the bar. And they're also a really good way to come and see places like this. You can come and see a BPTC provider, talk to our tutors, talk to our students, really see what the BPTC is like. You've also note on the bottom side, there are also the dates for our specific BPTC open days this year. So with that in mind, the next thing we'd probably look at doing is applying for an in-of-court scholarship for the BPTC. This is for those of you either on the GDL or in your last year of a law degree. So I've mentioned the phrase the INS a lot recently. The INS, there are 4 of them. They are very, very old, very, very ancient professional bodies set up to support barristers in all aspects of their lives, but mainly through the education and training of new barristers and the continual professional development of barristers already in practice. So, as I said, there's 4 INS, Middle, Lincoln's, Gray's and Inner. I'm a member of Inner. And between them, the INS have about £5 million to give out in the way of scholarships. So they're a great source of funding for the BPTC. Then the next stage is perhaps thinking if you're in your final year of LLB on the GDL, which IN should you start to pick to apply for a scholarship, as unfortunately you can only apply to the one IN for a scholarship. So these are the different scholarships that are on offer from the INS. Then we have ones for the BPTC, ones for the GDL or an MA in law. They also offer top-ups for very, very small pupillage awards, and they even offer opportunities to gain scholarships after the BPTC for perhaps internships or if you wanted to travel to do legal work. So they're a great source of funding for not just the BPTC or GDL, but further aspects of your career as well. So as such, choosing your IN is important. Whilst they all do the same thing, largely, which IN you apply to should hopefully depend on which one should hopefully be in the best place to give you the most money. Because after all, even if one of you is very lucky and can afford to do the BPTC without any financial support, an IN scholarship means a lot more than that. It means that 5 or 6 barristers have sat on a panel, looked at you and decided, yes, this person can cut it at the bar. So, choosing your IN. This is a phrase that has been around for about 300 years. And it is, to be honest, complete rubbish. There is no real science behind choosing an IN, really. Each IN has its own history, it has its own traditions, yet fundamentally, they're all largely very similar in what they do. Working with the careers department here, these are the things you should actually be looking at when joining an IN. The history of that IN may appeal to you. You might choose to go to an IN which has had the most prime ministers, or which one has the nicest food. After all, you will end up eating at these INs quite a lot as part of your professional commitments. International aspects tend to pull a lot of students to certain INs. I was always told anecdotally that Irish students went to Gray's. How true that is, I don't know. But each IN kind of has its own, as I say, little traditions and nuances. But the key things we think you should actually be looking at is the scholarship application criteria. Now, the criteria for each IN is actually the same. They all have the same 4 core values. We'll explain what these are in a moment. But it's the application form and which IN has the best application form for you. And that's what you really want to be looking at. So some INs forms are quite broad and ask quite generic questions, which gives you a lot of freedom to write about what you want. But some INs also have very detailed forms with very specific questions which ask you about very specific parts of your CV. And if you know your CV may not be so detailed in the areas they're asking you about, perhaps a broader IN's best for you. This is all about thinking tactically about which IN's going to be best placed to give you a scholarship. Also, don't forget about where your friends go. You spend a lot of time at these INs. They can sometimes be intimidating places. So if you've got an IN where all your friends are going to, then it might be worth applying for that one. So we'll go through the INs now briefly, analyse each one, and then you can start to get an idea for which IN maybe is suiting you. So Gray's IN, by far the smallest IN, but also has one of the smallest scholarship pots. However, Gray's IN does also offer residential scholarships. So Gray's have flats within their IN grounds which some students can apply to live in if living near London for the BPTC is hard. They also operate on a paper sift basis. Paper sift means that they do not unfortunately invite everyone in to interview. The good thing with Gray's is that if they choose to give you a scholarship, you get £5,000 standard, and then depending on your financial circumstances afterwards, they will either up it by a lot or a little. So Lincoln's IN is the next one. This is by far one of the biggest INs. As you can see, 23,000 members, 800 students, but as such does have a slightly bigger scholarships pot. It also offers residential scholarships, but it also does operate a paper sift, so that does mean that you may not automatically get an interview if you apply to Lincoln's. Once again, awards are merit-based. And this should be said now, no inn, unfortunately, will ever give you an award just based on your financial circumstances. Every inn will establish fully that you will cut it at the bar and you have a chance of a career at the bar before they give you any money. Yeah, as we said before, it's not just about the money with the scholarships, it's also about making sure that you've been effectively vetted by a panel of barristers and said, yes, it's for you. This doesn't mean to say if you don't get a scholarship, you're not going to make it, but it's a nice indicator. After Lincoln's, we have Middle. This is a medium-sized inn. It doesn't offer residential scholarships, unfortunately, but it does still have quite a big scholarships pot. Middle is one of the inns that attempts to interview every single applicant that applies. So if you're thinking perhaps your recent application isn't going to be as strong as you'd like it, or you know you've got things in the pipeline to happen between now and April, then maybe Middle is a good inn to look at for you. And once again, like all other inns, financial need is considered, but after the original decision to award a scholarship is given. Then finally we have Inner. Again, a smaller inn, but quite a large scholarships pot this year. They ask for 3 references and once again interview all applicants. So that's a very, very brief overview of the inns. Obviously there is much more resources online that you can read through at your own time, but this is kind of the key things we think are important for applying for inn scholarship. So after that, what are the inns actually looking for? The inns all say they're after 4 things: intellectual ability, motivation, advocacy potential, and personal qualities. Yes, that last one is a little bit vague. But these are the sort of things you should be ticking off on your application forms to make sure you're maximising your chances. So when we talk about intellectual ability, these are the things we think you should be showing. Now, naturally, grades are probably the best way to demonstrate intellectual ability, but they're not the only way. One of our students here, he had a bit of a duff grade on one of his LLB modules, yet he also had a private pilot's licence. I'd never get into plane with the man, but the inns thought that showed a good degree of intellectual ability. So as we can see, it's not just about grades. Yes, they're a big indicator, but they're by no means the only indicator. Also make sure in demonstrating your written ability, you're demonstrating your ability to write effectively and clearly, be that through extracurricular options or just through general things you've done either in work or at university. In addition to intellectual ability, they want to see motivation. For the inns, a scholarship is really an investment. They want to make sure that you're going to make the bar a better place. They want to make sure you're going to be a good barrister. So they want to see you motivated to do that. The chances are, if you're watching this video or you are here in the room, you are clearly motivated to create the bar. But the best way to demonstrate this is through legal work experience. So if you're in first or second year, perhaps this is the best chance to really be looking at getting those mini pupillages or marshalling schemes or connecting with barristers and trying to really get as much experience as you can to demonstrate that you want a career at the bar. But if you haven't got many pupillages yet or you're unsure, look at your pro bono work or immerse yourself into the world of law and the bar and try and sort of really pick up the key phrases and different nuances we all have. So that way you can really show that you want to create the bar because you've immersed yourself in this world. You've really made sure that you are surrounding yourself by members of the bar. After motivation comes advocacy potential and personal qualities, and these two are quite interlinked, really. But advocacy potential, as we said before, is not just oral, it's also written, and a big part of that would be in your application form. And oral advocacy would probably be assessed in your interview. Yet if you've got evidence through mooting or through debating or Model United Nations, these are really, really good ways to be making sure that you're showing advocacy is there. For example, that's why at the University of Law we try to make sure you moot as much as possible on our BPTC, because we know these are the core skills for a barrister and this is what both chambers and the inns are looking for. Make sure you can demonstrate the things you have a clarity of mind, you've got a good chain of logic running through what you're saying, but also you're succinct and you're concise. These are all things the inns are looking for that demonstrate a good advocate. And hopefully as the years go on through the BPTC, through all the other mini pupillages or networking or work experience you do, these sorts of skills will start to become slightly more honed. And then finally, personal qualities. This is very vague. This is very hard for us to really define. But we asked ourselves, what personal qualities a barrister want to have? What should all barristers be able to do? And we think they should all be able to act with integrity, independence and reliability. These are part of the core fundamental skills of being a barrister, also of being a good person in society. But barristers, with their code of conduct outlined by the BSB, these are qualities they actually have to have. So when thinking of a career at the bar is right for you, think about how you're demonstrating integrity, how you're standing up for something, how you're putting forward someone's best interest fearlessly without thought of consequence. And these are all ways to demonstrate your personal quality as a barrister. But fundamentally, just make them like you. Don't go in acting like you've already got it or acting arrogant. Just make them like you. That's what about. And actually, we think this is one of the more important qualities, because actually, if you've got the odd duff grade here or there, but you're a nice person, it'll probably bring it up. So the actual application, the deadline for it is on Friday the 2nd of November. Every year, no matter what year you're in now or what you're thinking of doing in the future, the BPTC scholarships deadline is Friday the 2nd of November. It's always the first Friday of the November in the year before you start the BPTC. And then references are due in as and when. If you're applying for GDL scholarships, the deadline's a lot later. It's Friday the 3rd of May. These are all actually contained in the little patch you've got as well in that flyer. So after you've done, or hopefully after you've got an in-of-court scholarship, you're armed with your cheque and you're then hopefully going to go on to the BPTC. And in working for the University of Law, I thought I'd take you through what the University of Law does on a BPTC, how it works, but also compare perhaps nationally with what happens over all providers. So the BPTC is split into two areas, core skills and knowledge. Knowledge is things like criminal litigation, civil litigation, are the real hard and fast rules of what you do and have to not do as a barrister. And then core skills is the actual softer side of it, the skills, the advocacy, the ability to write in a legal manner. These are the sorts of things that you're asked to do. Both here, we do it in very, very small classes. So, for example, with advocacy, you're never in a group of more than 6 people in London. In Birmingham, I think it's slightly bigger. But that's the course itself. You can see it covers a whole range of things and tries to prepare you as much as it can for life as a junior barrister. So at ULaw, or the University of Law, we offer our BPTC in Birmingham, Leeds, or here in London, Bloomsbury. We offer a lot of hours of advocacy. We also have a selection process, which I'll talk about in a moment. And we also have this really unique advocacy committee and scholarships to who we think are potentially very good advocates to make sure we create a really good environment for mooting here and public speaking. We also have a phenomenal careers team. We've also, since September 2017, started offering the BPTC LLM. This is an integrated master's qualification and gives you the chance to get a master's alongside your BPTC. This is clinical, which means that we get real life people with real life cases to come in, and as a BPTC student, you'll represent them in tribunals or you will give them real legal advice, which on the BPTC, you'll realise how you have to do lots of pro bono or free legal work to put on your CV and show that you've got the qualities and the ability to act as a barrister. The LLM ticks a lot of those boxes for you because it gives you pro bono work through our own legal advice centre. It's assessed quite simply just through the way of a reflective journal at the end of the year, marked by your supervisor. But also, if you're eligible for it, the BPTC LLM also allows you to access the £10,000 government postgraduate loan scheme, depending on your own circumstances. So that's the LLM. We also have, as I mentioned, the Advocacy Committee. When we are recruiting people onto our BPTC, we ask ourselves if they're top advocates, and if they are, we may offer them an advocacy scholarship. This means that they form part of an advocacy committee around the country, based in Birmingham, Leeds, and London, Bloomsbury, and it is then their job throughout the year to organise mooting opportunities. This is the list of some of the moots entered over the past few years, by the university. It's, I don't think, an exhaustive list anymore. I think we've entered into a few more. But these are external moots, because we make sure that if you do well enough in an advocacy allocation, i.e. a ranking of everyone in the year, we then send you off to compete for the university in these various moots. And that's the Advocacy Committee's job, is to make sure everyone gets a good chance at mooting. They also operate internal competitions open to as many people as possible, once again, because we know mooting's fundamental. We know you have to have it on your CV, and we know that's what chambers are looking for in pupillage. So we've made sure we have a committee dedicated to making sure you have a chance to moot or speak publicly. This is our careers service. Our careers service is phenomenal. We're all aware that this is the bar professional training course. Therefore, at the end of it, you'll want to be professional people with a job, hopefully. So we know that a career service to you is really, really important. We have an excellent range of people here who are all dedicated to making sure you have the best chance possible at obtaining pupillage. We do this through virtual workshops. We have live question time and panel events with barristers and pupillage committees. We also do mock interview workshops where we make sure you're grilled over and over again by tutors on many, many hard questions to make sure you've got the best chance. But our careers service is responsible for this. This is something we're very, very proud of. 71% of our full-time UK or EEA BPTC students who graduated in 2017 have secured pupillage within a year of finishing the course. We think that's phenomenal, and we're very, very proud of that fact. Because after all, the bar professional training course is there to make you pupils. We like to think we're quite successful in doing this, as these numbers tend to demonstrate. So actually applying for the BPTC, there are 2 rounds. You apply through a system called BARSAS. This is a bit like UCAS, but just for bar course providers. Every bar course provider's on there, including us. There are 2 rounds. Unfortunately, the people who run BARSAS haven't released the dates yet for this, so we're still in a bit of a dark period, but last year the closing date was the 17th of January, so it'll always be around the mid-January mark. In the first round, you apply to 3 providers. If you unfortunately don't get in to any of those providers, you can then apply to 3 more in the second round. Or if you missed the first round for whatever reason, you can apply to all 6 then in the second round. That's BARSAS. It's quite a simple process with a few application questions on there. You then have to make sure you've joined your in of court. Unfortunately, as provided we have no discretion about this, you have to have joined it in by the 31st of May of the year you start your BPTC. Unfortunately, if you join on the 1st of June, we can't admit you onto the course in the same year. Sorry, it's just the way things work. But hopefully, you've all decided or done this because you've all gone away and got lovely, great big scholarships from them all. However, if for whatever reason you haven't joined it in by then, that's the date. You also have to sit before September the bar course aptitude test. This is a test of logic, of critical thinking, that just makes sure you've got the right sort of mindset to gain a career and work at the bar. In practice, most people do pass this first time round, but you can resit, you just have to leave it 28 days. The BCAT, we don't have a closing date for that yet, because once again, they haven't released it. However, the BCAT tends to close after most course providers have actually started the course, rather logically. We're not sure why. But like joining it in, unfortunately, if you haven't done the BCAT by the time you get to us in your year of study, then we can't admit you. Sorry, that's just one of the rules. So make sure the BCAT is always in the back of your mind, especially for those 3rd years now. So at the University of Law, we also run selection events. These are really, really important to us. We're the only provider to require this. And this is because we only want to take on students who have a realistic chance of passing the course, because we want to make sure that you're in a small group surrounded by people who want to be there and have the ability to contribute to that group. So when we say selection, what we're not asking for is a great big test of your legal knowledge or of your knowledge of procedure or rules of evidence. We just want to make sure that you've got good raw advocacy skills. We don't ask you to prep anything before the day. We don't ask you to learn anything. We don't expect anything. We just want raw advocacy skill. And that's because we think that we're aware this is a very hard course. We know that and we admit that. But we just want to make sure that you're surrounded by a group of people who are also aware of that and also capable of passing it. Selection forms part of an oral advocacy test, usually a 4-minute plea and mitigation. That's the part at the end of a trial where we try to persuade a judge that this person shouldn't be punished particularly harshly. And we also have a short interview. That's our selection event. The INS play a very big part of your BPTC year. This is moving on after now. So during the BPTC year, your INS will ask you to go to 12 qualifying sessions, sometimes called dinners. In practice, there's only actually 11 of them because the 12th is your call night. But these are educational events where you can network with other barristers, get to know the people on not only your BPTC course but other providers, and they're usually held at the INS. Don't forget, the INS also offer things like residential weekends where you can get 2 or 3 qualifying sessions in one go. They offer mentoring schemes, marshalling schemes. So applying for an IN and getting the right IN is really important because these are the different things that they offer. They all generally offer the same thing, but the IN kind of turns into yours, quoted to me as if they're your legal family while you're on the BPTC, and that's actually quite true. I thought that was a bit weird myself, but actually, over the you spend a lot of time with them, you get to know these people really well. So your INs form a significant part of the support structure around you when you go into the BPTC. So applying for pupillage. We said earlier, pupillage is that final stage, it's the 2 portions of 6 months that turn you from a BPTC student to a fully fledged barrister. So this is the general process of applying for pupillage. We generally have the paper sift, the first round, and the second round. This is the general broad rule of thumb for most chambers you apply to. Paper sift is where they take your application, they look at it, and they decide if they want to invite you to a first round interview. After your first round interview, they'll cut the numbers down again and decide if they want to invite you to a second round interview. After that, they may then offer you a pupillage. This is generally how pupillage structures work. There are the odd occasion when they may do a secondary paper sift, where they may tell you you've got through the first round paper sift, have another read through all the forms, and actually decide there should be a secondary round. Or what they might do, what they might just ask you to do an assessed mini pupillage in between the first and second rounds, just to see what you like to work with. As I say, those are generally exceptions to the rule, but the paper sift, the first round and the second round are the 3 things that usually happen in a pupillage selection process. In my experience, I didn't ever do an assessed mini as part of an application process, nor did I have a secondary paper sift. But rule of thumb, that's what happens. All pupillages are advertised on the Pupillage Gateway. This is a centralised system, again, a bit like UCAS, but for pupillage, which all pupillages are advertised on. And a lot of pupillages also make you apply through the gateway. It's got its own portal, its own online forms, through which you can actually apply for pupillage. Though not all chambers ask you to apply through the gateway, some have their own procedures outside of it. You can now make 20 applications through the gateway. There's no restriction for any applications you want to make off the gateway. There are some preset questions on the gateway, for example, your work experience, position of responsibility, and so on. And after that, the chambers who make you apply through it can choose what questions to put onto it. They generally revolve around things like why do you want to be a barrister, why will you be good at it, or why this chambers. It does actually autofill all your personal details to every form, which is quite nice because that takes quite a long time. These are the dates for 2018 for the gateway. Opens for browsing relatively soon. And then we have a window, a 1-month window, which is when you can send off applications. It's worth pointing out now, any mooting you do, any pro bono you want to get in before the gateway shuts, has to be done before the 7th of February, otherwise you can't write about it. Another reason why at ULaw, when we actually arrange mooting, we kind of try to make it top heavy at the start of the year so you can write about it. Interviews then happen February to April. Very nice for those of you in 3rd year, because it means that it's just before your exams, and then offers all go out on the same day, the 7th of May. Pupillage, for the best part, has an 18-month lead time, which means you apply 18 months before you start. For example, if you were to apply in January, or February of this year, you probably wouldn't be starting until September, October of 2020. So if you can apply during your final year of undergrad, then hopefully you'll get a pupillage, do BPTC and start straight away. Or you can be like me and apply at your final year of your LLB or whilst on the GDL, not get anything unfortunately, but then apply again the BPTC, and then you have a year's gap just to work in whatever you want to do. But that's the general rule for the gateway. It's worth mentioning most chambers follow this timetable even if they don't actually apply through the gateway. Most chambers who have their own forms to fill out will probably still ask you to have it in by February. Those chambers who aren't on the gateway, it's a very non-exhaustive list, but this is just a list of chambers closing dates that don't operate on the gateway. As you can still see, a hell of a lot of them still happen in February. So again, be aware of it. Unfortunately, January, February is just a very busy month. Moving on to actually writing applications. This was made in conjunction with our careers service. This has also had, I don't know if it's the benefit or detriment of my little additions to it, but it's what we think you should be thinking about when writing an application. So the first thing we want you to do is prepare your CV. Now, with the exception of mini pupillages, it's very rare you'll submit your CV to either a pupillage application or a scholarship application. I should say from the off, all this application stuff is all perfectly relevant to both the Inns of Court scholarship application criteria and pupillage, but also anything else you choose to be doing. But these are the headings we think your CV should be having. Under public speaking should be a lot of mooting. Under things like pro bono and voluntary should be things like volunteering for local charities or assisting people through various complicated processes. Also, don't be scared to put any responsibilities and achievements that you've had, no matter how small they may seem to you. Some people may really like them. So make sure you have your CV prepared. But also, now you can see the sort of things we expect, actually then start to see where are the gaps. Okay, so I've got really good legal experience, but I haven't got much public speaking experience. Maybe that's when you start to use the time now to try and plug those gaps. And then we ask you to treat yourself as a client. Imagine you are a client you're representing. Imagine you've got to sift through all the good things and bad things of your CV and work out what should be putting forward, what you shouldn't be. On the bar course, we teach you about good facts and bad facts, things you should be singing out loud and things you should be shoring up. So these are quite self-explanatory, but these are good facts. You know, things that you've got the top mark in a certain module, or you've had a really good bit of pro bono which gave you really good legal experience. Yet, bad facts exist. We all definitely have them. No one is perfect, and if you are, very well done to you. But no one is perfect. Yet never feel the need to shy away from a bad fact. Never think, you know, oh, I've got a slightly odd grade in my public law module, or I've got no many pupillages. Never ignore it. Because, as I was saying earlier, barristers are quite clever people, and they will spot these gaps, and they will wonder why you haven't mentioned it. So make sure, if you have got no many pupillages, you're saying things like, I'm aware I've got no, or limited legal work experience, yet I'm seeking experience in X, Y, and Z area of law, or you're applying at X, Y, and Z chambers, because you need to be showing that you're aware there's a problem, and you're fixing it, you're shoring it up. So never shy away from a bad fact. Always try to make sure that you're telling everyone why you know it's bad and why you're fixing it. So when you've sifted through and you've decided what's going in your application and what's not, or what's being brought up or brought down, we then present our case. And we really ask you to stick to the facts and use evidence. Whilst you may be a brilliant communicator or have excellent abilities at public speaking, we don't know that unless you give us concrete examples and tell us why. So always stick to the evidence. We always say rely on facts, not claims. Try to avoid hyperbole, try to avoid making very big, bold, grandiose statements. Unfortunately, they just look a little bit off on an application. You should be confident, you should be saying what you want, but you should also be relatively subdued. So examples of how we say stick to the facts. So say you are a passionate defender of women's rights. Very good, very noble, very important, but anybody could say that. We don't really know how. So instead, bring up an experience. This person volunteered with the NCDV, and that has given them the insight into the issues that surround the plight of women. That's what we mean. Really try and find an experience or something you can latch on to make it work. But in addition to that, actually, if you have a particular area of your law you like, or there's something that you really want to do, but you haven't really got the experience, something to shore it up, you can create it. You can find ways to demonstrate. So, for example, this person, they like commercial law. They probably want to practice in it, yet unfortunately haven't got any mini pupillage in it yet, or hasn't mooted on this topic. So instead, this person's gone out and subscribed to The Economist, and they've said how they enjoy reading about commercial issues. This is a really good way to demonstrate your knowledge in an area of law, or demonstrate your enjoyment of it. So, for example, if you like family law, pick up a family law journal, give it a read, find out what's going on in the legal world in that sphere. But actually, please make sure you read it. Otherwise, you'll get to the interview and they will ask you questions on it, as they undoubtedly will, and you'll be sat there looking like a bit of a chump because you haven't. But that's our little view on it. Then please, please, please get to the point. Use active verbs. Say what you actually did. I think a phrase that annoys me a lot is when people say, this opportunity allowed me to, or this experience gave me the opportunity to do something. It's long, it's lengthy, and actually, no, it didn't. You went out and got that experience. You did something well, so own it. A lot of people think barristers are all arrogant people who can't shut up. That's not true. Actually, a lot of the BPTC students here tend to sort of dress up their sentences in long words. Just say what you did. Say that you drafted something. Say you observed it. Really own your achievements. If you did it, say it. Examples. This person, they're able to contribute to the findings of the project by researching French immigration law. Just say this, because what this has done here is it's put the research, what you did, your actions as the subject of that sentence. You're telling that person exactly what you did, because that's what they want to read about. Unfortunately, it's very hard to write about yourself in a very glorified way, but that's what we want. We want people just to say what they did. Another example is, I had the opportunity to draft the final report. Brilliant. But just say it. Just put it out that I drafted the final report. That's it. I think it's a harder skill than a lot of people realise to actually put what you're doing first. But make sure you are, because that's what people want to read. They want to see what you've done, what makes you a good potential barrister, what makes you a good scholarship applicant. And finally, please, please, please be concise. I know I'm probably quite a bad person for using too many words, but if 3 words will do where you have used 20, use 3. Because, and this is the sad truth, is that actually most application committees or most people reviewing whatever you've written don't give it a lot of time because they've got just so many. So you need to get to the point quickly and not waste their time with irrelevant words. And this is now quite technical, but we really want you to be omitting words that you don't need to be there. Or, to cut that phrase down, just omit words that you don't need. Or go one better and omit unnecessary words. Mums are actually very, very good at this. So I'd recommend giving them your application form and a red pen, and they can strike away with alarming enthusiasm if it's my mother. So just get somebody in a non-legal background to read it and ask them, what are you finding out about me? What do you know? Because what you might do is write it so often they actually forget about what you're saying, because what we are in danger of doing is omitting so many words, we're losing the nature of the sentence. So make sure you're cutting down, you're keeping clear, but actually you're still keeping the bones there, and that somebody who doesn't know you or is not legally experienced can read it and go, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, or I know what you're referring to. So that's what we mean when we say be concise. And finally, the interview. That link there, I'd recommend you all watching it, goes to a video we've done in partnership with a chap called Ed Connell and a few others. Ed is the head of the Pupillage Committee at 5 St Andrews Hill Chambers. And we go through with current students, or well, now ex-students, pupillage interviews, we give them scenarios, we ask them to answer the questions as they would in an interview, and then we get real barristers' feedback. So we're not going to watch it now because it's quite long, but I would recommend watching it. So these are some questions that I was asked in my various scholarship and pupillage interview processes. These I'd say are quite common because they're trying to find about you, what you've done. If you are asked, and you probably will be at some point, what's your biggest weakness? Please actually just say it. Don't say you're a perfectionist because that's boring now, everyone's done that. When I was asked this, I was quite bold with it, and I just said, very truthfully, my biggest issue was self-confidence, because it was. And that's pretty fundamental for a barrister. Like, that's bad. If you're not very self-confident, it's very hard to do things like this. Yet, I told that was my biggest weakness, and then I told them how I was getting over it. So I said to them, I'm aware I lack in self-confidence, and it's a bad thing. But what that means is that I make sure everything I say is correct. I make sure everything is shored up. And that way I turn from being someone with self-confidence issues to somebody who actually is saying everything I say and do is to the best of my abilities backed up. So be honest with your weaknesses or your achievements or the times you overcame a problem. Make sure you're telling them what you're doing to either solve that problem or get over that weakness. That's what they want to see, your problem-solving ability. Then they will also ask you questions about the bar. They will ask you why you don't want to be a solicitor advocate. They'll ask you why you're applying to that inn or that chambers, or they'll ask you why you want to be a criminal lawyer, what with all the cuts going on and things. You just have to have these answers down pat. There is no real way around it. You are going to be asked why do you want to be a barrister, and perhaps, unfortunately, your answer is not that different from other people's, because it's very hard to create a brilliant, lovely, original answer. Yet, if you have these answers nailed, and you know they're good, and you know you've got them in your head, that means when you get into an interview, and these are one of the first questions you're asked, because they will be, you're suddenly settled, you've got an answer in, you know. So have these answers in your head, and make sure you've got them, they're reliable, and then you can just relax a little bit when they ask you the question. They also like to ask you situational questions. They seem to like to ask you what you do if you see a drunk barrister. I don't know how common these are floating around the courtrooms, but if you see one, be prepared to know what to do because they seem to want to ask you. These, again, they're not asking for right or wrong answers. They're not asking for, detailed, exact plans and flowcharts. What they want to see is how your mind works. Again, how do you solve a problem? How did your mind break down issues and sort of strategically solve them? So again, there's probably no proper right or wrong answer, but they want to see what you're doing. These are some common exercises they like to ask you to do. They're either in first round interviews of pupillage or at scholarships. For example, in my scholarship interview, I was asked to analyse a case. I was given a very recent case with lots of sort of juicy family law in it, and I had to find out what was the judge saying, why was the judge saying it, what were the facts, what was the ultimate outcome, things like that. So just be aware of case law, be ready to read it, be ready to analyse it, but also get ready to debate. Get ready to be given a question or a statement and asked to put either side forward. So I've been asked to advocate on behalf of Donald Trump's wall. I've been asked to say why stop and search should apply to WhatsApp messages. I've been asked to say why vulnerable witnesses should not get special treatment. These are all opinions you probably disagree with. But yet, you've got to be able to put them forward in a persuasive manner. And what they're not asking you to do is be a politician and rattle off thousands of facts and figures. They're asking you to use persuasive techniques. And the best way I dealt with this is by having a big blue book full of all these possible scenarios and then writing down 3 points for and against. So that way before an interview, because naturally I'd be there about 5 hours too early, sat in a coffee shop, I'd be reading through it and try to sort of fill my mind with different things I could be saying. But these are all about persuasiveness or logical thinking. Also, please be aware of current legal affairs. Please be aware of what's going on in the legal world. On the bar course or on your undergrads, it's very easy just to throw yourself into your books and not really, or not unfortunately have the chance to read up on these things. But these are just headlines I've pulled off Guardian Law this morning. Guardian Law is a great tool. It's not particularly in-depth compared to a lot of places, but it gives you all the headlines, it gives you all the things that are going on. So, sorry. So again, these are just things I've pulled off this morning. Be aware of them. Don't feel like you have to know them all inside out, back to front, but be aware to comment on them, have an opinion, or know the opposite opinion as well, prepare to advocate on them. Again, this is how we think you should be answering questions in interviews. And if you're asked a question about, take that one, disclosure in cases, don't just address the topic of disclosure, actually answer the question. Make sure when you're finishing it, at the end of your sentence, you're actually finishing it with an answer. Also be aware that there are hypothetical questions, but they're just there to establish how your mind works, how you think, perhaps the logic going through your mind. Also, I'm very bad for umming and ahhing, very bad for it. But if you can try and iron out your verbal tics, try and make sure that you're sounding calm, polished, smooth. But also don't be monotonous. I'm aware I'm again probably not the best person to be saying this because I've got quite a low, deep voice. But try to use a bit of tone, a bit of colour to your voice. Don't let them fall asleep, please. And finally, don't be baited. They are going to ask you questions. They're going to pull your views apart. They're barristers. They're trained to actively destroy everything you're trying to say. So don't let them bait you. Don't rile up. Just put your points clearly and try not to back down. And finally, body language. Make sure you look like you want to be here. Make sure you look like you actually are engaged, but also don't appear arrogant. Never act if you've already got the scholarship or pupillage. Make sure you're looking engaged, confident, assertive, but never arrogant. I'm aware that's a very hard balance to strike, but that's what people want. These are some tips, or in some cases horror stories. These are things I wish I knew before I went for interviews. An unusual one, yet a very truthful one, is don't shake hands with interviewers. This has become the new etiquette. In the old days, shaking hands was expected. Now, it's rather people didn't. This is largely due to cultural sensitivities, unless, of course, they make the first move, in which case then do shake their hand, unless you don't want to. It's a politically correct minefield, but it's all based on what you want to do, ultimately. You're there just as much as they are. Please don't get involved in sort of knockabout waiting rooms, psychological warfare. You'll usually be chucked in a room with about 10 other people before an interview, and there's always one person there badgering on about how they interned at the UN for years and they won advocacy awards 50 times in a day. They will be there and they'll be trying to really sort of tell you how good they are and try and diminish you, and just don't get involved with it. It's not good for them. It's certainly not good for you if you fight back. So I used to deal with it by thinking, oh, this person must be really threatened by me if they think they have to do this. They probably weren't thinking that, but you just have to deal with little ways to deal with it. Please get there early, never be late for an interview. I'd like to think it goes without saying, but not always the case. About what to wear, we get asked this a lot. The best way to deal with what to wear is just to go onto a chamber's website and look at the junior tenants and see what they're wearing. It's usually the best way because that's what's expected at the bar. For everyone, men and women, wearing a suit is usually the best tack, and gents try and wear a quieter tie. Also, finally, don't act like you've already got it. We've been through this before about having personal qualities and not looking arrogant, but don't act like you've already got it. Act like you want it. Act like you could have it, but never act like you've already got it. And finally, never assume they've read your form. They probably have, but they've probably read 20 others, so can't remember what yours said. So don't repeat it word for word, but just be aware that if you're referring to things in your application form or questionnaire, they might not have read it, so be aware of that. Finally, has anyone got any questions? We will be having mingling and glasses of wine afterwards, but if anyone's got any questions now. But apart from that, thank you all for coming. And for those watching at home on the video, that is the University of Law's guide to what is the bar and how to get there.